Close your eyes and let your mind drift back through the centuries, past the modern world, past the industrial age, past the medieval times, all the way back to the ancient sands of Egypt, over 4,000 years ago. Tonight we're going to explore what life would have been like if you were a slave in ancient Egypt. This is a story of survival, endurance, and the human spirit, told in a way that will help you drift peacefully into sleep. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Get comfortable, close your eyes and let the steady rhythm of ancient knowledge guide you into peaceful rest. Imagine waking up as the first rays of sunlight creep through the small window of your cramped quarters. The air is already warm, carrying the scent of the Nile River and the dust of the desert. You are not alone. Dozens of other slaves sleep around you on simple reed, their breathing soft and rhythmic, like waves lapping against the shore. Your sleeping mat is woven from papyrus reeds, the same reeds that grow along the riverbank where you sometimes work. Each strand carefully woven by hands like yours, hands that know the feel of rough fiber, the patience required to create something useful from raw materials. The mat is thin, providing little cushioning against the hard-packed earth floor, but it is yours, one of the few possessions you can claim in this life. The walls around you are made of mud, thick enough to keep out the worst of the desert heat, thin enough that you can hear the stirring of other quarters, the soft murmur of waking voices, the shuffle of feet on earthen floors. These sounds have become as familiar as your own heart, constant companions in the journey from sleep to wakefulness. Your name might have been taken from you, replaced with a simple designation, perhaps worker of the East House, or bearer of stone. Your identity slowly dissolved into your function, like sugar dissolving in warm water, gradually, peacefully, completely. But sometimes, in the quiet moments before full wakefulness, you remember another name, a name your mother whispered to you as a child. Soft syllables that taste like honey on your tongue, like distant music from a half-remembered dream. The overseer's voice echoes through the quarters, not harsh, but firm, steady, like a metronome keeping time. Rise, he says, rise for another day of service, and you do, as you have for countless mornings before, and will for countless mornings to come. His voice carries the authority of the pharaoh himself, filtered down through layers of hierarchy until it reaches you, final and absolute, yet strangely comforting in its predictability. You might have been born into this life, your parents' slaves before you, their parents' slaves before them, a long line stretching back through generations, like links in a chain, each connected to the next, unbroken, continuous, eternal. Your grandmother's hands were calloused from the same work that now calluses her back bent by the same burdens that now strengthen your spine. Her eyes held the same patient acceptance that you see reflected in still water, or perhaps you were captured in a raid, taken from your homeland across the desert, the memory of your former life growing dimmer each day, like footprints in sand being slowly erased by the wind, until even you cannot quite remember who you were before. The journey to Egypt was long, walking in chains across endless dunes, the sun beating down mercilessly, water rationed, hope fading with each step, until arrival became not a destination but a relief, a chance to stop walking, to rest, to accept whatever came next. The hierarchy among slaves was clear and simple. Those who worked in the pharaoh's palace wore better clothes, ate better food, slept in more comfortable quarters, while those in the quarries and construction sites lived harder lives. But even this hardship had its own rhythm, its own predictable pattern, like the rise and fall of the Nile each year. How slaves moved through marble corridors, their soft sandals silent on polished floors, while field slaves walked barefoot on earth and stone, each path worn smooth by countless feet before them. Your day begins before dawn, in the quiet hours when the world is still and peaceful. The morning air is cool against your skin, a brief respite before the heat of the day. You drink water from a clay vessel, the liquid cool and refreshing, washing away the remnants of sleep. The vessel is rough under your fingers, made by slave hands like yours, fired in kilns, tended by people who understand the transformation of earth into utility, clay becoming something greater than its origins. If you were assigned to agricultural work, you would walk to the fields along the Nile, your bare feet knowing every stone in the path, every rise and dip in the ground. The walk takes perhaps half an hour, time to fully wait, to prepare mentally for the day ahead, to watch the sky lighten from deep purple to pale gold. The fields stretch endlessly under the vast Egyptian sky, green crops swaying gently in the morning breeze, hypnotic, soothing, like nature's own lullaby. The irrigation channels run like veins through the landscape, carrying life-giving water from the great river to thirsty plants. You have helped dig some of these channels, moving earth one basketful at a time, the work slow but satisfying, knowing that your efforts will help crops grow, will feed people, will sustain life. The water moves lazily through the channels, catching the morning light, sparkling like scattered jewels across the dark earth. Your tools are simple, a wooden hoe, a sickle, a basket woven from reeds. These instruments become extensions of your body, familiar, comfortable, their weight as known to you as the weight of your own hands. The hoe handle is worn smooth by countless palms, the wood polished by years of use, warm to the touch even in the cool morning air. Your sickle has a slight curve to its blade, perfectly shaped for cutting grain stalks, efficient, purposeful, beautiful in its simplicity. The work is rhythmic. Hoeing follows a steady beat: scratch, lift, step, scratch, lift, step, over and over, like a meditation, like counting sheep. Your mind free to wander while your body performs its tasks. You think of nothing and everything, memories drifting through your consciousness, like clouds across the sky. Sometimes you remember dreams from the night before, strange visions of flying over the desert, of swimming in rivers of starlight, of speaking with gods who listen patiently to your worries. The soil tells stories under your hoe, different colors revealing different seasons of flooding, layers of silt deposited by countless risings of the Nile. Each stroke of your tool reveals history, dark earth mixed with lighter sand, tiny shells from ancient seas, fragments of pottery from civilizations that rose and fell before your birth. You are part of this continuum, adding your own layer to the archaeological record, your sweat mixing with the earth, becoming part of the eternal cycle. If you were a quarry worker, your days would be spent in the desert, extracting limestone and sandstone for the pharaoh's building project. The work is harder here, but even this has its own meditative quality. The stone is ancient, formed over millions of years under ancient seas, compressed and solidified into blocks that will outlast everything else you know. Each hammer blow against your chisel sends vibrations up your arm, a physical conversation with deep time, with geological patience. The sound of chisels striking stone creates a constant percussion, chip, chip, echoing off the quarry wall, a rhythm that becomes part of your heart, you're part of your breathing. Dozens of workers, spread across the quarry face, each contributing their own note to the symphony of extraction. The sound carries across the desert, audible from miles away, a testament to human industry, to the organized effort required to build monuments that will stand for millennia. The stones you cut will outlast you, outlast your children, outlast empires. They will stand for thousands of years, monuments to human endurance, to the patient work of countless, including yours. Your labor becomes immortal, carved into the very foundations of history, permanent, eternal, like the stars in the desert sky. Each block bears invisible traces of your effort, your strength, your time, becoming part of something far greater than any individual life. Water breaks come regularly. The overseers understand that dehydrated workers are less productive. You sit in whatever shade you can find, often just the shadow of a cart or a fellow worker, and drink slowly, savoring each drop, feeling it restore your body, cool your throat, refresh your spirit. The water comes from deep wells, drawn up by wooden buckets on long ropes, each drop precious in this desert climate, treated with the reverence usually reserved for sacred things. The sun moves across the sky in its eternal arc, marking the passage of time, but time moves differently when you're focused on simple, repetitive tasks. Hours pass like minutes, or minutes stretch like hours. Time becomes fluid, dreamlike, as if you're already half asleep. The shadow of your body shortens and lengthens, a sundial measuring your progress through another day, another small eternity of patient work. Life as a slave in ancient Egypt was not lived in isolation. You were part of a community, a network of relationships that provided comfort and meaning, even within the constraints of bondage, like threads in a tapestry. Each life connected to others, creating patterns of support and friendship that made survival possible. Your community was your strength, your refuge, your reason to continue when individual will might have faltered. Your fellow slaves became your family, sharing food when someone was sick, telling stories during rest periods, celebrating small joys and mourning small losses together. These relationships develop slowly, naturally, like plants growing towards sunlight, requiring patience, trust, time. The woman who sleeps 3 mats away lost her husband in a construction accident, but the community embraced her children, fed them, taught them, ensured their survival through collective care. There were hierarchies even among slaves. House servants often looked down on field workers. Skilled craftsmen held higher status than common laborers, but these distinctions mattered less during the quiet evening hours, when exhaustion made everyone equal, when the simple need for human companionship overcame social barriers. A master carpenter might share his superior evening meal with a field hand who had shown kindness to his elderly mother, hierarchy dissolving in the face of human decency. The skilled slaves held positions of relative privilege, scribes who could read and write, architects who understood engineering, physicians who knew the healing arts, metalworkers who could shape copper and gold. These individuals often lived in better quarters, ate finer food, wore cleaner clothes, but they also bore greater responsibility, their mistakes more visible, their failures more consequential. Success and failure both measured in pharaonic displeasure or approval. Children born into slavery learned their roles gradually, playing alongside their parents during work, absorbing the rhythms and expectations of their lives as naturally as learning to walk. For them, this life was not a punishment or a tragedy. It was simply reality, as natural as breathing, as inevitable as the sunrise. A 5-year-old might carry water to workers, feeling important, useful, part of something larger than themselves, unaware that other children in other places lived different. The games children played reflected their world, building small pyramids from mud bricks, playing overseer and worker, mimicking the agricultural cycles with stick dolls and imaginary fields. Their laughter echoed through the quarters in the evening, bright sounds that reminded adults of joy, of the possibility that happiness could exist, even here, even now, even under these circumstances. Old slaves were treated with respect, their experience valued, their advice sought. They knew which overseers were harsh and which were fair, which tasks could be done quickly and which required patience, which shortcuts were safe and which were dangerous. This knowledge was passed down like heirlooms, precious, carefully preserved, shared in whispered conversations during the cool evening hours. An elderly woman might know exactly how to treat a particular type of infection, knowledge worth more than gold in the desert. The oral traditions among slaves were rich and complex. Stories of distant homelands, tales of clever slaves who outwitted cruel masters, legends of gods who watched over the oppressed, songs that carried the rhythms of work, the patterns of breathing, the cadences that made labor bearable. These stories traveled from generation to generation, modified, embellished, but always carrying their essential truths about survival, endurance, hope. The Egyptian social system was complex, but stable. Pharaohs ruled by divine right. Nobles managed the kingdom. Free citizens farmed and traded. Slaves provided the foundation of labor that supported it all. Everyone knew their place, their role, their purpose. There was certainty in this, predictability, like the flooding of the Nile, regular, expected, part of the natural order. Stability had its own comfort, even when that stability included bondage. Religious festivals provided breaks from routine. Even slaves participated in some celebrations, allowed to rest, given extra food, permitted to sing and dance. These moments of joy were treasured, remembered during difficult times, bright spots in the steady rhythm of daily life. During the festival of Opit, even slaves might receive small portions of beer and honey cakes, a sweetness that made the return to regular rations more bearable. Marriage among slaves was allowed, even encouraged by some masters. Families provided stability, children ensured future workers, love found ways to flourish, even in bondage, growing quietly, persistently, like desert flowers after rain, beautiful, resilient, proof that the human spirit cannot be completely contained. Wedding ceremonies were simple, witnessed by the community, blessed by whatever gods seemed willing to attend, creating bonds that transcended the legal reality of ownership. Food for slaves was simple but sufficient. Bread made from emmer wheat formed the foundation of every meal. The grain was ground slowly, methodically, between stone querns, the rhythm of grinding, as steady as a heartbeat, round and round, creating flour that would sustain life for another day. The work of grinding was often assigned to children or elderly slaves, their smaller hands better suited to the precise circular motions, their patience unlimited when the alternative was hunger. The bread itself was dense and dark, hearty, filling, each loaf baked in communal ovens, the smell of baking bread rising, with the calling workers to their first meal, promising sustenance for the labor ahead. The crust was thick, the interior soft, designed to satisfy hunger and provide energy for physical work. You would tear off pieces with your fingers, chewing slowly, making each mouthful laugh, appreciating the simple miracle of grain, transformed into nourishment. Onions and garlic were staples, providing flavor and nutrition, their sharp scents cutting through the dusty air. These vegetables could be stored for long periods, reliable, dependent. Like old friends who never disappoint, you would eat them raw during work breaks, feeling their strong flavors, awaking your senses. Remind you that you are alive, that you could still taste, still feel. The burn of raw onion in your mouth was almost pleasant, proof of sensation, of continued existence. Garlic was considered medicinal as well as nutritious, believed to provide strength and ward off illness. Workers who labored in the hot sun were given extra rations, their bodies demanding the minerals and vitamins contained in the pungent bulbs. The taste lingered on your tongue, mixing with the dust and sweat of labor, creating a flavor that would forever remind you of these days, these experiences, this particular chapter of existence. Beer was the common drink, safer than water, nutritious, mildly intoxicating. The brewing process was as ancient as civilization itself. Barley mixed with water, left to ferment in the warm Egyptian sun, transforming grain into liquid comfort. The beer was thick, filling, It satisfied both hunger and thirst, providing calories and peace of mind with each slow sip. Children drank watered-down versions, their small bodies unable to process the full strength, but still receiving the nutritional benefits. The brewing was often done by slaves who had shown aptitude for the process, understanding the delicate balance of ingredients, the timing of fermentation, the signs that indicated readiness. These brewers held positions of relative importance, their skills valued, their products essential to the smooth functioning of the community. A good brewer could make even the hardest day bearable through the simple provision of quality beer. Fish from the Nile supplemented the diet when available, caught in nets by designated fishermen. Among the slave population, the river teemed with life, perch and catfish, tilapia and carp, each species requiring different techniques, different knowledge, different patience. The fishermen worked in the early morning hours, when the air was cool and the fish more active, their nets spreading like dark flowers on the water's surface. The fish were salted and dried, preserved for times when fresh food was scarce. Each piece was savored, eaten slowly, gratefully, nothing wasted, every morsel appreciated. The drying process took days. The fish laid out on reed mats under the relentless sun, turned regularly, protected from flies and dust, transformed from fresh meat into concentrated protein that could sustain life through lean periods. Vegetables grew in the fertile soil along the river: lettuce, cucumbers, leeks, radishes. Tending these gardens was considered lighter work, often assigned to older slaves or those recovering from injury. The work was peaceful, meditative, hands in soil, connecting with the earth, watching green shoots emerge from brown dirt, life emerging from apparent lifelessness, hope made visible. Each plant was tended individually, watered carefully, protected from pests, nurtured with the patience that comes from understanding the value of food. The gardens were laid out in careful rows, maximizing the use of available water, minimizing waste. Each plot told a story of seasons, of careful planning, of hope for future harvests. You might spend hours weeding, your fingers learning to distinguish between desired plants and invaders, the work requiring attention but not stress, allowing your mind to wander while your hands stayed busy. Cooking was communal, large pots simmering over fires, the smoke rising lazily into the evening sky. Meals were eaten sitting on the ground, using fingers or simple wooden spoons, conversation flowing around the shared food, stories told, problems discussed, comfort found in the simple act of eating together. The pots were made of clay, fashioned by slave potters, who understood the properties of local earth, the temperatures required for firing, the shapes that cooked food most efficiently. The evening meal was the social center of slave life, the time when community bonds were strengthened, when news was shared, when collective decisions were made about matters that affected the group. An elderly slave might tell stories of the pharaohs of his youth. A woman might share news of her pregnancy. Children might perform little songs or dances they had learned during the day. These moments of normalcy were precious, proof that humanity persisted, even under oppression. Medical care was basic, but present. Egyptian medicine was surprisingly advanced. Doctors understood the importance of cleanliness, the value of certain herbs, the need for rest and proper nutrition. Sick slaves were cared for, not out of compassion necessarily, but because healthy workers were more valuable than dead ones. Still, care was care, relief was relief, and healing happened, regardless of motivation. The medical knowledge among slaves was passed down through generations. Old women who knew which plants eased, which rituals helped difficult births, which prayers seemed most effective for different ailments. This folk medicine supplemented the official medical care, providing comfort and hope when formal treatment was unavailable. A compress of cool mud for a fever, herbs steeped in hot water for stomach troubles, gentle massage for aching muscles after hard labor. Sleep came easily after long days of physical labor. Bodies exhausted, minds cleared by the simple repetition of work. Slaves slept deeply, dreamlessly, like stones at the bottom of a quiet pond, undisturbed, peaceful, restored by the darkness and silence of night. The transition from wakefulness to sleep was gradual, natural, like sunset fading into darkness, consciousness dissolving into the deeper rhythms of rest and recovery. The spiritual life of slaves was complex, layered, woven from Egyptian religion, memories of homeland beliefs, and the practical mysticism that emerges from lives lived close to survival. The gods of Egypt were present in daily life, not distant abstractions, but active forces that influenced weather, harvests, health, fortune. You might pray to Khnum, the ram-headed god who shaped humans on his potter's wheel, asking for strength to endure another day of labor. The goddess Isis was particularly beloved among slaves, protector of the oppressed, mother of Horus, symbol of resilience and survival. Her temples welcomed even the lowest classes, offering moments of peace, brief respites from the endless cycle of work. The incense burning in her shrines created clouds of sweet smoke, carrying prayers upward, toward divine ears that might, possibly, care about the suffering of the powerless. Small shrines appeared in slave quarters, simple altars made from stones and clay, decorated with offerings of breadcrumbs, drops of beer, wilted flowers found along the riverbank. These private spaces allowed for personal prayer, quiet moments of communion with whatever forces governed existence. The act of creating these shrines was itself a form of resistance, an assertion that inner life persisted despite outer bondage. The changing seasons brought their own spiritual rhythms. The annual flooding of the Nile was both practical necessity and religious miracle, transforming the landscape, bringing life to the desert, creating the conditions that sustained Egyptian civilization. Slaves watched the rising waters with the same mixture of hope and anxiety as free citizens, their fate equally dependent on the river's generosity. Death was a constant presence, but not feared as much as expected. Workers died from accidents, disease, exhaustion, old age. The funeral rites for slaves were simple, but community participation made them meaningful. Bodies wrapped in coarse linen, buried in shallow graves, but accompanied by prayers, tears, memories shared among those who remained. Death was seen as transition, not ending, a passage to whatever existence awaited beyond the boundaries of mortal experience. The concept of the afterlife provided comfort. Egyptian beliefs suggested that the worthy would enjoy eternal peace, freedom from labor, abundant food, reunion with loved ones. Even slaves could aspire to this blessed existence, their suffering in life potentially earning them rewards in death. This hope made present hardships more bearable, temporary inconveniences on the path to ultimate liberation. Dreams held special significance, considered messages from gods, glimpses of other realities, prophecies of future events. Slaves shared their dreams, interpreted them collectively, found guidance and comfort in the visions that came during sleep. A dream of flying might predict escape from current troubles. A dream of abundant food might foretell better times ahead. These nocturnal journeys provided relief from daytime limitations. Music and rhythm were woven throughout slave life. Work songs that matched the pace of labor, lullabies that soothed crying children, chants that accompanied religious observances. The human voice was the primary instrument, accompanied by simple percussion, hands clapping, sticks beating, stones striking, creating complex polyrhythms that connected individual workers into unified groups. The songs often contained coded messages, stories of resistance, maps to freedom, warnings about dangerous overseers. This musical underground allowed information to travel safe, disguised as entertainment, hidden in plain sight. A song about birds flying south might actually be directions to escape routes. A lament for lost lovers might carry news of successful escape. Years passed like seasons, each similar to the last, yet subtly different. Your body changed gradually, muscles strengthening, skin darkening under the constant sun, hands developing permanent calluses, back learning to bend without breaking. The changes were so gradual as to be almost imperceptible, like the wearing away of stone by wind, constant, patient, inevitable. Memories began to layer like sediment, early experiences buried under more recent ones, but sometimes surfacing unexpectedly, triggered by a particular scent, a quality of light, a fragment of overheard conversation. The smell of baking bread might suddenly transport you to childhood, to your mother's hands, kneading dough, to a time when the future held different possibilities. The faces around you changed. Some workers died, others were sold, transferred to different projects, reassigned to new masters. But the community persisted, absorbing newcomers, adapting to losses, maintaining its essential character despite constant flow. Like a river that remains recognizably itself despite the constant flow of different water, the slave community endured through transformation. New slaves arrived periodically, captured in wars, born into bondage, sold by desperate families. Each brought their own stories, languages, customs, traditions. The community absorbed these influences, becoming richer, more complex, more diverse. A Nubian might teach new techniques for working with gold. A Syrian might share different methods of food preservation. Each addition strengthened the whole. Children you had watched grow up, left for adult assignments, their places taken by new young faces. The cycle continued, endless, natural, neither good nor bad, but simply inevitable. You began to understand your role as temporary guardian of ancient wisdom, keeper of techniques and traditions that would outlive your individual existence, part of a chain stretching back to the beginning of human civilization. The physical landscape changed slowly around you. New buildings rose, old ones crumbled. The Nile altered its course slightly year by year, creating new channels, abandoning old ones. Gardens matured, trees grew taller, provided more shade. The human community and natural environment evolved together, each shaping the other, creating something greater than either could achieve alone. Relationships deepened through shared experience. The person who slept nearby became not just a neighbor, but a witness to your dreams, your nightmares, your quiet moments of despair and unexpected joy. These bonds were forged through proximity and necessity, but they became genuine, valuable, irreplaceable forms of love that transcended the categories recognized by the free world. Your understanding of the larger world grew more sophisticated. You learned to read the moods of overseers, the politics of the noble class, the rhythms of trade and diplomacy that affected labor demands. This knowledge was practical, survival skills disguised as curiosity, but it also provided a sense of participation in events larger than immediate circumstances, connection to the grand sweep of historical force. The philosophical questions that emerged from long experience began to surface. What was the purpose of existence? Why did some suffer while others prospered? How should one live when choices were limited? These questions had no easy answer, but contemplating them provided a form of mental freedom, an exercise of faculties that remained beyond the reach of external control. As evening approached each day, shadows lengthening across the work sites, the quality of light becoming softer, more forgiving, there was a collective sense of completion, not just of tasks finished, but of another day survived, Another small victory against the forces that sought to reduce human beings to mere instruments of labor. The walk back to quarters was often silent, but not filled with the quiet satisfaction of endurance. Bodies tired but not broken, minds clear from the simplicity of physical work, freed temporarily from the complexities that plagued those with more choices. There was peace in this simplicity, comfort in the reduction of existence to basic elements: work, food, rest, companionship. Sunset over the Nile was a daily miracle, the sky transformed into sheets of gold and crimson, the river reflecting the heavens, creating a world of double beauty. Even slaves paused to watch, finding in this natural display a reminder that beauty persisted, that the universe contained wonders beyond human cruelty and oppression. These moments of transcendence were gifts, brief respites from the weight of circumstance. The evening meal took on ritualistic significance, not just nourishment, but communion. The simple act of sharing food became sacred, assertion of humanity in circumstances designed to deny it. Conversations flowed around practical concerns, but underneath ran deeper currents, unspoken acknowledgements of mutual dependence, gratitude for survival, hope for tomorrow. Children's voices provided a soundtrack to evening activities, their laughter and play creating an atmosphere of normalcy, of life continuing despite everything. Their games were innocent, their concerns immediate, their capacity for joy undiminished by circumstances. They had known no alternatives to. Watching them provided adults with perspective, reminder that life itself was valuable, regardless of the conditions in which it occurred. The transition to sleep was gradual, natural. Bodies exhausted by labor found rest easily. Minds cleared by routine work settled into peaceful emptiness. The sounds of the community quieting, conversations trailing off, breathing becoming regular, synchronized, like a choir of sleepers performing an ancient lullaby of survival. Dreams came easily to the exhausted, but they were often dreams of flight, of freedom, of lives lived differently. These nocturnal visions provided relief, compensation for daytime limitations. In dreams, slaves became kings, workers became artists, the oppressed became liberators. The unconscious mind refused to accept the boundaries that daylight imposed. Stars emerged in the clear desert sky, brilliant, uncountable, eternal. They had watched over countless generations of human struggle, would continue watching long after present troubles had become historical footnotes. This cosmic perspective provided comfort, a sense of participation in something vast, enduring, ultimately meaningful despite temporary appearances of meaninglessness. And so the days continued, one flowing into the next, like water in the Nile, constant motion that somehow created stability. Each sunrise brought familiar tasks, familiar faces, familiar rhythms. The predictability that might have seemed oppressive, instead, became comforting, a foundation of certainty in an uncertain world. Your hands learned every texture, every weight, every resistance they would encounter. Wood and stone, clay and metal, grain and water, fiber and flesh. Each material had its own personality, its own requirement, its own cooperation to offer or withhold. Working with them became a form of communication, a dialogue between human intention and material reality. The seasonal cycles provided larger rhythms. Flood season brought different work, different foods, different weather. Planting season demanded different skills, different timing, different hopes. Harvest season offered different rewards, different challenges, different satisfactions. Within the constraints of bondage, these variations provided richness, complexity, the illusion of change within changelessness. Generations came and went. Children became adults. Adults became elders. Elders returned to the earth that had sustained them. The community persisted through these transitions, absorbing losses, celebrating continuation, maintaining traditions that connected past to future. Your individual existence became part of something larger, more durable, more significant than personal circumstances. The monuments being built around you grew slowly, stone by stone, each block placed by hands like yours, guided by minds working in coordination toward common goals. These structures would outlast everyone involved in their construction, becoming permanent testimony to collective human effort. Your labor was becoming immortal, carved into the very foundations of civilization. Knowledge accumulated gradually, techniques refined through repetition, innovations emerging from necessity, solutions discovered through patient experimentation. This wisdom was shared, preserved, passed down through generations of work, becoming part of the great human heritage of practical understanding. Your experience contributed to this eternal library of human knowledge. Relationships deepened beyond the categories that free society recognized. Bonds forged through shared hardship, mutual dependence, collective survival, created forms of love and loyalty that transcended conventional definitions. These connections became treasures, sources of meaning, that transformed mere existence into something approaching fulfillment. The spiritual insights that emerged from lives lived at the margins of society were often profound, understanding born from suffering, wisdom distilled from endurance, compassion developed through vulnerability. These qualities of spirit remained invisible to those who measured value only in terms of freedom and possessions, but they were real, valuable, transformative. Time itself seemed different when measured in decades rather than. The urgency that characterized free life gave way to something deeper, more patient, more aligned with natural rhythms. Seasons mattered more than hours, years more than months, lifetimes more than individual experiences. This long perspective brought its own form of peace, and as consciousness gradually dissolved into the warm darkness of approaching sleep, as the day's labors faded into memory, as the community settled into collective rest, there was a sense of completion, of participation in something ancient, enduring, ultimately meaningful. The individual voice joining the great chorus of human experience, adding its small note to the eternal song of survival, endurance, hope. Sleep came like a river, slow, deep, irresistible, carrying awareness away from the constraints of time and place, toward realms where all limitations dissolved, where the soul could rest, could dream, could prepare for whatever tomorrow might bring. In sleep, all were equal, all were free, all were part of the great mystery that encompasses, and ultimately redeems all human experience. The system of control in ancient Egypt was built on predictability rather than cruelty. Rules were clear, consequences known, punishments swift but not excessive. This created an environment where slaves could understand exactly what was expected, eliminating uncertainty, reducing anxiety, creating a strange sort of peace within bondage. Minor infractions resulted in minor punishments, extra work, reduced food, isolation from the group. These consequences were uncomfortable, but not devastating. Temporary setbacks in the steady flow of daily life, like stones in a stream. The water flows around them, continues on its path, unchanged in its essential nature. The daily routine of discipline was as regular as sunrise. Each morning, the overseers would inspect the slave quarters, checking for cleanliness, counting heads, ensuring everyone was accounted for. This ritual of accountability became as natural as breathing, expected, familiar, even comforting in its consistency. You knew where you stood, what was required, what would happen if you failed to meet expectations. Beatings occurred, but they were not random or sadistic. They served a purpose within the system, a clear message about boundaries and expectations. The pain was real, but finite. Healing came with time, and life continued. The memory of punishment served as a reminder, but did not need to dominate every thought, every moment. The instruments of discipline were simple: a wooden rod, a leather strap, tools that left marks but rarely caused permanent damage. The overseers understood that broken slaves were useless slaves, so punishment was measured, calculated, designed to correct behavior rather than destroy the person, like a gardener pruning a plant, cutting away unwanted growth while preserving the essential structure. Public punishment served multiple purposes. It corrected the offender, warned others, and demonstrated the master's authority. But even these public displays followed established patterns, prescribed rituals that everyone understood. The slave being punished knew how to behave, when it would end. This predictability removed much of the terror, replaced fear with resignation, panic with patience. Running away was difficult and dangerous. The desert was vast and unforgiving, water scarce, direction uncertain. Most escaped slaves were recaptured within days, returned to face predictable consequences, then reintegrated into the system. The attempt itself was often punishment enough. The fear, the thirst, the loneliness, the eventual recognition that there was nowhere to go. The tracking of escaped slaves was systematic. Professional hunters knew the landscape, understood human behavior under stress, could read signs in sand and stone. They would follow water sources, check known hiding places, question travelers and traders. Their success rate was high, their methods proven, their capture almost inevitable. This knowledge spread among slaves, becoming part of the collective wisdom that discouraged escape attempts. Those who returned from failed escapes often became advocates for acceptance, sharing their stories of hunger, exhaustion, despair. Their experiences served as cautionary tales, vivid reminders of why compliance was preferable to resistance. These returned runaways were not shunned, but welcomed back, their suffering acknowledged, their lessons absorbed, their reintegration complete. Some slaves found ways to gain favor with their overseers through skill, reliability, personality. These individuals might receive better assignments, more food, lighter punishments. The system had flexibility, rewards for those who worked within it, incentives that made compliance preferable to resist. Favoritism created its own hierarchy among slaves. Those with connections to overseers gained influence, could intercede for others, provide information, negotiate better conditions. This system of patronage was understood by all, accepted as natural, even beneficial when it helped the broader community. Like a web of relationships, each connection strengthening the whole structure. Trust was earned slowly, demonstrated through consistent behavior over time. A slave who proved reliable might be given additional responsibility, access to restricted areas, knowledge of household secrets. This trust was precious, carefully guarded, never taken for granted. Breaking it meant not just punishment, but the loss of privileges that had taken years to acquire. Egyptian law actually provided some protections for slaves. They could not be killed arbitrarily. They had rights to food and shelter. They could sometimes earn freedom through exceptional service. These protections were limited, but they existed, creating boundaries even around absolute power. Small islands of security in an ocean of uncertainty. Legal proceedings involving slaves followed established procedures. Witnesses were called, evidence presented, decisions made according to precedent. Even in bondage, there was due process, a recognition that slaves were human beings, with certain basic rights. This legal framework provided hope, however slim, that justice was possible, that the system had limits, that absolute power was not truly absolute. The documentation of slave ownership was meticulous. Records kept, transfers recorded, inheritances documented. This bureaucratic precision created stability. Slaves knew who owned them, what their status was, what their future might hold. The paperwork itself became a form of protection, proof of legal ownership that prevented arbitrary seizure, illegal sale, unauthorized punishment. The threat of sale to worse masters helped maintain order. Slaves knew that their current situation, however difficult, might be better than alternative. This knowledge created a form of gratitude, appreciation for small mercies, relief at avoiding worse fates, contentment found in the absence of greater suffering. Stories circulated among slaves about different masters, their temperaments, their treatment of workers, their expectations, and punishments. This intelligence network helped everyone understand their relative position, appreciate their current circumstances, fear potential changes. The unknown was always worse than the familiar, uncertainty more frightening than predictable hardship. Market days brought reminders of vulnerability, slaves seeing others bought and sold, families separated, lives disrupted. These witnessing experiences reinforced the value of stability, the importance of avoiding behaviors that might lead to sale, the wisdom of accepting current conditions rather than risking change. Religious beliefs provided another form of control. The pharaoh was divine, the social order was sacred. Rebellion was not just dangerous, but blasphemous. This belief system was deeply ingrained, not just imposed from above, but accepted from within, creating internal compliance, spiritual submission, peace through acceptance of divine will. The temples played a role in maintaining order. Priests preached acceptance, patience, endurance. They taught that suffering in this life led to rewards in the next, that obedience to earthly masters demonstrated loyalty to divine authority, that the gods themselves had ordained the social hierarchy. These religious teachings provided meaning for suffering, purpose for endurance, hope for eventual justice. Rituals of submission were woven into daily life, bowing to overseers, requesting permission for basic needs, demonstrating deference in speech and posture. These behaviors became automatic, unconscious, part of the rhythm of existence, like breathing or walking, actions performed without thought, integrated into the very fabric of identity. The psychology of control operated on multiple levels: physical punishment for the body, social isolation for the mind, spiritual submission for the soul. This comprehensive approach addressed every aspect of human nature, leaving no part of the person untouched, no avenue of resistance unexplored, no possibility of rebellion unconsidered. Yet within this system of control, small spaces of freedom remained: private thought, secret friendships, hidden traditions. These mental and emotional refuges could not be completely eliminated, providing tiny oases of independence in a desert of compliance, like underground springs, hidden but vital, sustaining life in impossible conditions. The rhythm of discipline itself became hypnotic, predictable patterns of behavior and consequence, action and reaction, cause and effect. This regularity created a trance-like acceptance, a peaceful surrender to forces beyond individual control, like waves on a shore, constant, eternal, soothing in their very inevitability. The human mind adapts to almost any circumstance. Given enough time, your consciousness as a slave would slowly reshape itself around your reality, like water taking the form of its container, flowing, adjust, finding peace within constraints. Days blended into each other, creating a timeless quality. Yesterday, today, tomorrow. These distinctions mattered less, when each day followed the same pattern, brought the same tasks, offered the same small pleasures and familiar challenges. Time became circular, rather than linear, each day a variation on an eternal theme. The absence of choices created a paradoxical form of freedom. When decisions were made for you, the burden of choice was lifted, the anxiety of wrong decisions eliminated. Your mind could focus on the present moment, find peace in the simplicity of predetermined paths, like a river flowing through a canyon, constrained but purposeful, directed but natural. Memory played strange tricks. The past before slavery grew distant, dreamlike, Sometimes you wondered if it had been real at all. The present became everything, immediate, concrete, undeniable. Future plans seemed pointless, so attention focused on the moment, the task at hand, the breath in your lungs, creating an attentional mindfulness, a forced meditation on the here and now. The dissolution of past identity happened gradually. Names became less important, personal history faded, individual preferences seemed irrelevant. What mattered was function, role, usefulness. This transformation was not violent but gentle, like snow melting into water, changing form but retaining essence, becoming something new while preserving the fundamental nature of being. Dreams of freedom evolved over time. At first, they might be elaborate fantasies of escape, rescue, revolution, but gradually, these dreams became simpler, smaller, more realistic. Freedom might mean an extra portion of bread, a moment of solitude, a kind word from an overseer. The definition of liberty adjusted to fit possible reality. Identity shifted gradually. You were no longer who you had been, but you were becoming someone new, someone adapted to this life, skilled at these tasks, comfortable with these rhythms. There was loss in this transformation, but also a strange sort of peace, the anxiety of endless possibilities, replaced by the certainty of defined roles. The development of institutional memory was crucial. Slaves who had lived in the system for years became repositories of wisdom, understanding the subtle patterns of masters' moods, the seasonal rhythms of work, the safest ways to navigate daily challenges. This knowledge was survival itself, passed down through quiet conversations, shared glances, unspoken understanding. Emotional regulation became essential. Anger was dangerous, despair was debilitating. Excessive joy drew unwanted attention. The successful slave learned to maintain emotional equilibrium, keeping feelings controlled, expressions neutral, reactions measured. This emotional discipline was both protective and numbing, necessary but costly. The creation of meaning within meaninglessness required remarkable mental flexibility. When your life's purpose was determined by others, when your goals were not your own, when your achievements benefited those who oppressed you, the mind had to find alternative sources of significance. Perhaps meaning came from helping fellow slaves, preserving cultural traditions, simply surviving another day. Relationships became more important than possessions, since possessions could be taken away, but connections between people were harder to destroy. Friendship, loyalty, shared experience, these became the real treasures, stored not in boxes, but in hearts, accessible at any moment, renewable, inexhaustible. The bonds between slaves transcended normal social categories, age, gender, origin, skill level. All these distinctions mattered less than shared experience. Common suffering created uncommon unity. Mutual vulnerability fostered mutual protection. The slave community became a chosen family, bound not by blood but by circumstance. Stronger than many biological relationships, communication developed its own secret language, glances that conveyed warnings, gestures that offered comfort, silences that spoke volume. This non-verbal vocabulary was essential for survival, allowing coordination without detection, support without suspicion, resistance without recognition. A raised eyebrow might mean overseer approaching. A subtle nod could indicate, "I understand your pain." Small pleasures took on enormous significance. A cool breeze on a hot day, a kind word from a fellow slave, a meal that tasted better than usual. These moments became beacons of light, proof that joy was still possible, that the human capacity for happiness could not be completely crushed. Like stars in a dark sky, small but brilliant, enough to navigate by. The cultivation of gratitude became a survival strategy, focusing on what could be worse rather than what could be better, appreciating small mercies rather than mourning great losses. This mindset was not natural optimism, but learned resilience, a deliberate mental practice that preserved sanity, maintained hope, prevented despair from becoming overwhelming. The rhythm of work became hypnotic, repetitive motion, steady breathing, focused attention. Without realizing it, you would enter trance-like states, consciousness floating somewhere between sleeping and waking, time passing without notice, tasks completing themselves, the body working while the mind rested. These meditative states were deeply restorative, providing mental escape even when physical escape was impossible. In these moments, the boundaries between self and task, between worker and work, between present and eternal, became blurred. You were not a slave performing labor. You were motion itself, rhythm itself, life itself, expressing through human form. The development of internal dialogue was crucial. Conversations with yourself, imaginary discussions with absent loved ones, rehearsals of future scenarios. This inner voice became a companion, a counselor, a friend who could never be taken away. The mind created its own society, its own entertainment, its own comfort. Dreams became important, the one place where freedom was still possible. In sleep, you could be anyone, go anywhere, do anything. These nightly escapes provided balance, release, hope. The boundary between dreams and memories, sometimes blurred, creating internal worlds richer than external reality. Sleep patterns adapted to circumstances, learning to sleep despite noise, discomfort, anxiety. The body's wisdom adjusted to available rest, making the most of brief opportunities, finding renewal in shallow sleep, restoration in interrupted rest. This adaptation was both remarkable and tragic, evidence of human resilience and human suffering. The processing of trauma happened in waves. Some days, the weight of circumstance felt unbearable. Other days, it seemed almost normal. The mind had its own timetable for dealing with loss, grief, injustice. Sometimes protection came through numbness, sometimes through acceptance, sometimes through transcendence. Spiritual development often accelerated under oppression. When external circumstances were beyond control, internal growth became possible. Many slaves discovered depths of patience, compassion, wisdom they had never accessed in freedom. Suffering became a teacher, hardship a guide, limitation a doorway to expand. The concept of time changed fundamentally. Past and future became less relevant than the eternal present. Each moment contained everything necessary for existence: breath, awareness, the simple fact of being alive. This temporal shift was both liberating and limiting, freeing attention from regret and worry, while constraining hope and planning. Mental habits formed slowly, but deeply. Patterns of thought that supported survival, ways of interpreting experience that maintained sanity, cognitive strategies that found meaning in meaninglessness. These mental structures became as automatic as breathing, as essential as food, as protective as shelter. The Egyptian year was governed by the Nile, its flooding, its retreat, its gifts of fertile soil. As a slave, your life would follow these same natural rhythms, work changing with the seasons, tasks shifting with the water levels. Your existence connected to forces far greater than human will or desire. The ancient Egyptians divided their year into 3 seasons: Akhet, the flood season; Peret, the growing season; and Shem, the harvest season. Each brought its own demands, its own opportunities, its own challenges. Like movements in a vast symphony, each section distinct but harmonious, creating a complete cycle of life and labor. During the flood season, when the river covered the farmland, construction work increased. Slaves were reassigned to building projects, quarries, craft workshops. The change provided variety, new challenges, different rhythms, like a musical composition with multiple movements, each section distinct but part of a larger whole. The flood season lasted approximately 4 months, from July to October, when the Nile rose and spread across the valley, covering fields, filling irrigation channels, depositing rich silt that would nourish crops. This was a time of renewal, rebirth, preparation for the year ahead. Even slaves felt the excitement of this annual miracle, the promise of abundance, the hope of good harvests. Construction projects during flood season were massive undertakings. Pyramids, temples, monuments to pharaohs and gods required thousands of workers, coordinated effort, precise planning. Slaves found themselves part of something larger than daily survival, contributing to structures that would last millennia. Their labor became immortal, carved in stone, preserved for eternity. The quarries came alive during flood season. Stone cutting, block shaping, transportation of massive building materials. The work was hard but purposeful, each stone carefully shaped, each block precisely measured. The sound of chisels on stone created a constant rhythm, like thousands of heartbeats, synchronized, hypnotic, meditative. Craft workshops offered different challenges: pottery making, textile weaving, metalworking, jewelry creation. These skills required patience, precision, artistic. Slaves assigned to crafts often developed deep expertise, finding satisfaction in creating beautiful objects. Even if they would never own them, the act of creation itself became reward, proof of human capability, evidence of skill and worth. The planting season brought its own hurried but hopeful, seeds going into the rich silt, left by the receding waters. Days of careful preparation followed by the patient wait for growth. You would walk the same fields daily, watching for the first green shoots, counting the days until harvest, measuring time by the height of growing grain. Peret began in November, when the flood waters receded, leaving behind fertile black soil, perfect for cultivation. This was the season of possibility, when tiny seeds held the promise of abundant harvest. When careful work today determined survival tomorrow, the responsibility was enormous, the stakes clear: success or failure, measured in bushels of grain. Plowing was the first task, breaking up the flood-softened earth, preparing it for seeds. Wooden plows pulled by ox, guided by human hands, created furrows in precise patterns. The work required coordination between animal and human, patience with stubborn cattle, skill in maintaining straight lines. It was agricultural choreography, performed by teams working in harmony. Irrigation was crucial. An elaborate system of channels, basins, dikes, regulated water flow, distributed precious moisture, prevented flooding and drought. Slaves worked in teams to maintain this system, digging channels, repairing breaks, adjusting flow rates. Their work was vital, invisible, essential, like the circulation system in a body, unnoticed until it failed. Seeds were planted with ceremony, each type in its proper place, at its proper time, in its proper manner. Wheat, barley, flax, vegetables, herbs. The planting was both practical and spiritual, connecting human effort with natural forces, earthly labor with divine blessing, hope with reality. The growing season required constant vigilance, weeding, watering, protecting crops from pests, monitoring growth, adjusting care based on weather conditions. This was intimate work, requiring close attention to plants, understanding of their needs, sensitivity to their condition, like caring for children, demanding, rewarding, essential. Harvest time was intense, but joyful, the culmination of the year's long days cutting grain, separating wheat from chaff, storing the bounty that would sustain everyone through the coming year. Even slaves shared in the satisfaction of a successful harvest, the security of adequate food, the pride of work completed. Shemu began in March, when crops reached maturity, ready for harvest. This was the season of fulfillment, when months of careful work yielded their reward, when the success or failure of the year became clear, when abundance or scarcity determined the comfort of the coming month. Harvesting required speed and precision, Grain had to be cut at exactly the right time, neither too early nor too late. Weather could destroy a crop in hours, so timing was crucial. All available workers participated, slaves and free people alike, united in the urgent task of gathering food. The tools of harvest were simple, but effective: sickles for cutting grain, baskets for carrying, threshing floors for separating wheat from chaff, winnowing baskets for cleaning grain. These implements became extensions of the body, familiar as hands, reliable as breath, essential as life itself. Threshing was communal work: oxen trampling grain, workers beating stalks, separating the valuable seed from worthless chaff. The rhythm was hypnotic, the sound constant, the work meditative, like a great drum circle, everyone contributing to the beat, creating music from labor. Storage was critical. Grain had to be protected from moisture, insects, rodents, theft. Granaries were built with care, designed to preserve the harvest, ensure food security, prevent waste. These structures were as important as temples, housing the substance of life, protecting the foundation of civilization. Market days brought variety to the routine. Slaves assigned to carry goods, load boats, assist traders. These days offered glimpses of the larger world: travelers from distant lands, goods from foreign kingdoms, stories from beyond the immediate boundaries of daily life. Like windows in a closed room, brief views of possibilities beyond the familiar walls. The markets were sensory overloads: colors, sounds, smells, languages, spices from far lands, textiles in brilliant hues, precious metals gleaming in sunlight. The diversity was overwhelming, exciting, a reminder that the world was vast, varied, full of wonders beyond daily experience. Trade brought cultural exchange, ideas, techniques, stories, beliefs flowing along with goods. Slaves serving traders often learned fragments of foreign languages, heard tales of distant places, absorbed knowledge of different ways of living. These glimpses of other worlds planted seeds of imagination, hope, possibility. Religious festivals punctuated the calendar: processions, ceremonies, celebrations. Even slaves participated in some way, watching, serving, sometimes even joining in. These events provided breaks from routine, opportunities for community, reminders that life contained joy as well as labor. Like flowers blooming in a desert, beautiful, temporary, but proof that beauty was still possible. The festival of Opet was particularly significant, a celebration of the pharaoh's divine power, the renewal of royal authority, the blessing of the kingdom. Elaborate procession, magnificent displays, communal feasting. Even slaves received extra food, time for rest, opportunity to witness grandeur. These moments of spectacle provided hope, wonder, connection to something greater than daily toil. The winter months were cooler, more comfortable for physical labor, but also shorter. Days that began in darkness and ended in darkness. Work by firelight, meals by lamplight, conversations in the soft glow of oil flames. These intimate hours created deep bonds, shared stories, mutual support. Through the difficult season, winter brought different challenges. Shorter days meant less working time, but also less heat stress. Food storage became critical, supplies carefully rationed, preserved foods supplementing fresh produce. The season tested planning, preparation, community cooperation. Survival depended on collective wisdom, shared resources, mutual support. Night brought its own rhythm, gradual slowing of activity, completion of daily tasks, preparation for rest. The transition from day to night was gentle, natural, like the slow dimming of a flame, consciousness gradually releasing its grip, awareness softly fading, until sleep claimed you completely. Evening conversations were treasured, time to share experiences, offer comfort, exchange information. These quiet hours created deep friendships, lasting bonds, mutual understanding. Words spoken in darkness carried special weight. Intimacy, truth, connection that transcended daily roles and responsibilities. The stars became companions, constant, reliable, beautiful. Their patterns marked seasons, guided travelers, inspired wonder, for slaves with little else to call their own. The night sky was a free gift, available to all, impossible to steal, eternally beautiful, endlessly fascinating. A reminder that some things remained beyond human control, beyond ownership, beyond the reach of masters. Not all slaves performed the same work. Specialization created hierarchies, opportunities, pathways for advancement within the system. Your particular skills might determine your assignment, your treatment, your daily experience, like branches on a tree, all connected to the same trunk, but reaching in different directions. Skilled craftsmen among the slaves were highly valued. Carpenters, metalwork, stone carvers, weavers, their expertise was irreplaceable, their training extensive, their work requiring years to master. These slaves enjoyed better conditions, more respect, greater security. Their knowledge was their protection, their skill, their shield against the worst aspects of bondage. House servants lived differently from field workers, closer to their masters, privy to family secrets, trusted with valuable possessions. Their days were filled with domestic tasks, cleaning, cooking, childcare, personal service. The work was less physically demanding, but required different skills, discretion, loyalty, understanding of social nuances. Scribes among the slave population were rare but highly prized. Literacy was power in ancient Egypt, and literate slaves could serve as record keepers, message carriers, administrative assistants. They worked with papyrus and ink instead of hoes and hammers. Their minds, their primary tools, their value measured in knowledge rather than muscle. Medical knowledge created another form of specialization. Slaves who understood healing, who knew which herbs treated which ailments, who could set bones and tend wounds. These individuals served their communities in special ways, bridging the gap between suffering and relief, their skills benefiting masters and fellow slaves alike. Musicians and entertainers occupied a unique position. Their work brought joy, created atmosphere, provided cultural enrichment. Slave musicians might perform at banquets, festivals, religious ceremony. Their art transcended their social status, creating moments of beauty that elevated everyone who heard them. Proof that creativity could flourish even in bondage. Teachers existed among slaves as well, older individuals who passed on skills to younger ones, knowledge flowing from generation to generation, like water from one vessel to another. These teaching relationships created deep bonds, master to apprentice, elder to child, wisdom preserved and transmitted through personal connection. Language skills were valuable for slaves who could serve as translators. Ancient Egypt was cosmopolitan, filled with foreigners, traders, diplomats, ambassadors. Slaves who spoke multiple languages could bridge communication gaps, facilitate trade, enable diplomacy. Their linguistic abilities opening doors to better positions, greater respect, increased security. Within the structure of slavery, humanity found ways to express itself, small acts of kindness, moments of joy, expressions of love. These experiences proved that the human spirit could not be completely suppressed, like flowers growing through cracks in stone, life persisting, beauty emerging, hope surviving against all odds. Friendships developed slowly, carefully, born from shared hardship and mutual understanding. A fellow slave might share their bread when you were sick, cover for you when you stumbled, offer comfort when grief overwhelmed you. These relationships were treasures, precious because they were freely given, meaningful because they required personal sacrifice. Love bloomed even in bondage. Slaves fell in love, married when permitted, created families, raised children. The heart recognizes no social boundaries, feels no restrictions. loves whom it chooses regardless of circumstances. These romantic relationships provided emotional sustenance, hope for the future, reasons to endure present difficulties. Children brought light into dark places. Their laughter echoed through slave quarters. Their games provided entertainment for adults. Their questions reminded everyone that curiosity and wonder could still exist. Watching children grow, learn, develop their own personalities. This gave meaning to sacrifice, purpose to survival. Music emerged naturally from slave communities. Work songs that matched the rhythm of labor, lullabies that soothed tired bodies, stories sung to preserve memory and culture. These musical traditions created identity, maintained connection to heritage, provided emotional expression in a world that offered few outlets for feelings. Celebrations happened despite circumstances. Births, marriages, religious holidays, small achievements, even these were honored, marked, remembered. Joy insisted on expressing itself, finding reasons to emerge, creating light in darkness, proving that celebration was a fundamental human need that could not be denied. Grief was also shared communally. When someone died, the community mourned together, told stories about the deceased, honored their memory, provided comfort to survivors. Death was acknowledged, respected, integrated into the fabric of community life, not hidden or ignored, but faced together. Acts of resistance took subtle forms. Slaves might work slowly when overseers weren't watching, tell jokes at the expense of masters, maintain cultural traditions, despite official disapproval. These small rebellions were important, assertions of human dignity, proof that complete submission was impossible, sparks of independence that kept hope alive. The Nile River was constant, eternal, unchanging in its essential nature even as it flooded and receded, rose and fell, gave life and demanded respect. Like your existence as a slave, it followed patterns, older than memory, rhythms established before human civilization, flows that would continue long after individual lives ended. Standing by the river at dawn, you might watch the sun rise over the water, painting the surface gold and crimson. The beauty was free, available to all, slave and master alike. These moments of natural splendor reminded you that some things could not be owned, some experiences could not be controlled, some joys belonged to everyone. The sound of water moving was hypnotic, constant, soothing, like the sound of breathing, of heart, of life itself continuing regardless of individual circumstances. The river sang its ancient song, the same melody heard by countless generations, a lullaby that soothed humanity since the beginning of time. Boats passed regularly, carrying goods, people, messages between distant places. Their passage marked time, measured progress, connected your small world to the larger universe beyond, like thoughts drifting through consciousness, some staying, some passing, all part of the endless flow of existence. Fish swam beneath the surface, invisible but present, following their own purposes, living their own lives, pursuing their own survival. Parallel existences in the same space, reminding you that life took many forms, served many purposes, found many ways to continue. Birds came to drink, their reflections dancing on the water, wings catching sunlight, voices adding music to the river's song. Freedom embodied, movement without restriction, flight without permission, beauty without purpose beyond its own expression. Hope made visible, in living form. The fertile banks supported endless life, plants, insects, small animals, an entire ecosystem thriving in the space between water and desert, proving that life found ways to flourish, even in narrow margins, in difficult conditions, in spaces others might consider impossible. Seasons changed, but the river remained, drought years and flood years, times of plenty and times of scarcity. The water continued its journey to the sea, carrying with it the dreams, hopes, tears, and prayers of countless souls, including yours, making you part of something larger, eternal, meaningful, beyond individual circumstance. Your daily labor might take you far from the river, but it was always there, calling, waiting, offering its eternal perspective on temporary trouble, its ancient wisdom about survival, its timeless lesson that all things flow, all things change, all things continue, and as the sun sets over the Nile, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, your eyelids grow heavy, your breathing slow, your mind releases its grip on the day's concerns, letting them flow away like the river itself, carrying them downstream, leaving you in peace, in quiet, in the gentle embrace of sleep. The ancient world fades around you, but the river continues, eternal, constant, peaceful, its song becoming your lullaby, its rhythm matching your heartbeat, slower, slower, until consciousness gently releases and dreams take over, carrying you safely through the night, like a boat on calm water, drifting, floating, at peace. And so we end our journey back through time, to the world of ancient Egypt, where even in bondage, humanity found ways to survive, to love, to hope, to continue. Let these images fade now, like footprints in sand, washed away by time, leaving only peace, only rest, only the gentle sound of your own breathing, matching the eternal rhythm of the Nile. Sleep well, dream peacefully, and let history's lessons drift away until tomorrow.